Welcome to Backstage Money, real world finance for musicians. I'm your host, Jason K. Powers, and this is where music and money collide. Honest stories and practical lessons from people who make it work. Today, I am joined by Danny Zelisko, concert promoter since 1974, founder of the legendary Evening Star Productions, and longtime regional exec for SFX back in the day, now Live Nation, and now head of Danny Zelisko Presents, producing some 150 concerts a year, especially in the classic rock and vintage artist area. He has spent a lifetime working with legends and still does. Danny, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being on. It's funny. I had to laugh last time when we crossed paths again because we were both at the LA Gun Show in Denver, and I'm up there. I was chit chatting with the guys, and I think you came up behind me or something, and they all saw you, and they're all like, "Hey, da da da," and so you went up there and we're chatting with them, and then I think Olga, I think was her name, and she turned around and handed me her phone, was like, "Take our picture or your phone." And so I took your all's picture, but I hadn't put two and two together. I didn't even know who you were standing there in front, I think, because I never had seen you in person. I had seen
Uh-huh.
you in a box somewhere. And then I didn't realize it until I saw you post that picture that I took on your social media. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh, that's
Oh,
who
it's
that
him.
was.
Yeah. Yeah. Olga was special. Like, I can't wait to see her again. She's very fun.
Yeah. 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 That was a fun show. Well, so Danny, tell me, I always like to start with an origin story. How did you get into this thing you do, this promotion business for so long?
Many years ago, in a land far away, Chicago, they had a radio station called WLS, and there was another one called WCFL in Chicago. They're AM stations. So it was before FM radio. So this goes back several steps in terms of devices of how to get your music. And but back then, when you look back at what the top 40 was in the early 60s and then into the mid 60s, it almost turned into like a progressive rock kind of format, which I love. But prior to the Beatles happening, you had all the great old bands, all the old singers, and all those terrific songs, the doo wop. And before you heard the blues, you heard Elvis and you heard the Four Seasons and Bobby Rydell and all those guys. We really liked listening to what was on the radio, my brothers and I. And we would sit with our little transistor radios when we were supposed to be going to sleep, and we'd have those under our pillows so our dad couldn't hear them, and we would call out the songs. Or then we'd say, okay, name the group. And at a very early age, without being instructed, we were identifying the group or the song, because we figured if you could do both, this was a famous song. This was the mark of a great tune. And we'd argue about whether or not it should be number one or number 10 or number 20. And we had no idea that people did this for a living. So as time went on, a few years of doing that, we started going to the record store a couple miles away. It was near our school, and we drive over there on Fridays and pick up the top 40. They called it the Silver Dollar Survey, which came out every Friday with the top 40 songs, and we'd match them up against what we were listening to and making sure that we heard all these songs. It was too early for us to be buying records. And then one day, the guy in the record store, who by then knew us, told me that I would really like this song, and he hands me a copy on VJ Records of the Beatles playing Please Please Me, which came out long before I Want to Hold Your Hand or She Loves You, which I still in my head still think of those as later songs.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I loved the song, and I bought it. It was one of the first records I ever bought. The first one was Puff the Magic Dragon. And album wise, the first one I had was the Four Seasons with Big Girls Don't Cry on it. And when I heard this Beatles song, I flipped out. I played it for everybody that I knew. Hardly anybody cared. And I mean, and that song's got all of the great marks of great Beatles songs in it. Although it wasn't their greatest song, it was one of my favorite because it was the first one that I heard. And I started noticing how weird it was that Love Me Do was on a different record label. And She Loves You was on a different record label, and I Want to Hold Your Hand was on it. It's four different record labels within a year the Beatles had singles out on. But prior to I Want to Hold Your Hand and the Ed Sullivan thing, um, I just fell in love with this group, which was like 8 or 9 months at least before the Ed Sullivan show happened in February of '64. And when Ed Sullivan finally did come around, I was blown away by how taken and smitten everybody became
Yeah.
with the Beatles. And I'm sitting there kind of going, I told you so. And they go, you did not. You didn't
Yeah.
tell us. Oh, that song, that doesn't count. What do you
Mhm.
mean it doesn't count? It counts to them. And so without knowing it, without hearing the term, I learned about a group being a baby band. I mean, the Beatles were the definition of a new group, a baby band, which is what, I later ended up being told were what these groups were to be called. And so then when they came over and did their touring and the movies, and it showed the bedlam and the fun of the concerts and people screaming, it was like I was a big baseball and football hockey fan being in Chicago, but seeing this as a completely different form of spectator sport, going to concerts. I love the whole gathering of the tribe, so to speak, when you go to a baseball game, or we started going to football games a little later, where you're gathering with strangers to enjoy the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was never explained to me, what's a concert? Well, you go to a show and you enjoy your favorite band. But the depth of the sociology of it never
Mhm.
really, it still isn't really talked about that much. But that's the fun of it. The fun of going to a live event is people who like the same thing that don't know each other in the same room enjoying it at the same time. And I've always enjoyed that. I lived at Wrigley Field for years, Comiskey Park, and the Bears used to play in Wrigley Field. The Wrigley Field is like the shrine of all.
Yeah.
Now they have great concerts there all the time, but I'm long gone. I've only seen one show there in my life. But anyway, that's kind of how it started. I was a baseball player. I was a catcher. I loved doing that. I was going to be in the major leagues, and then all this music crap happened, and the '60s developed into more English groups, American groups, the San Francisco groups, and all these bands that released. Woodstock happened.
Oh yeah.
I'm in high school. I loved that Woodstock thing. I wish I could have gone, but I'm glad I didn't. I wouldn't have been prepared for it at all. Now I would have been 14 when that happened. But shortly after that, 1970, late 70, 71, 72, in high school, I started going to a lot of shows downtown at the Auditorium Theater and saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Pink Floyd, and Bowie, and T Rex, and Procol Harum, and King Crimson, and Humble Pie, all these fabulous groups, Moody Blues, when they were all in their prime, when they were still all climbing up.
Mhm.
I mean, to us, they were huge, and we love so much different music. Miles and Pharoah Sanders and Coltrane and Eric Dolphy. We love jazz. There was a group of us who were real, total musical snobs, and we truly loved all these different genres of music. There was nothing that was too deep for us, and going to the concerts, was spiritual at that time, and one thing led to another. And by the time I was getting out of high school, I was really thinking about doing this.
Mhm. So then
But that's kind of how it all began. They did a concert at my high school that I didn't attend. Still kick myself for. It was Stevie Wonder and the James Gang. It was like
uh
3 or 4 bucks. They must have been, back then groups weren't paid that much to do, shows, just like baseball players weren't paid very much either.
Mhm.
Um, and tickets weren't that much. So it wasn't like anybody was getting rich off of it. Uh, but, obviously things escalated and turned into what it's turned into, which is a mind blower. But the fun part about the '60s was this is when all the groups and society was coming into its own, and the music influenced so much, it dictated so much of the way that people behaved and what they thought. There were people who were into this group and not into that group. And that was the difference in classes. The classes wasn't white or black or male or female or young or old. It was just, is it good? Does it stick?
Sure.
And a lot of us self-appointed experts were the first ones to give our opinions to it. The shows we went to in Chicago, it was a prog rock heaven for us. There was a couple of great little venues that we loved going to. The Aragon Ballroom was one, and the Auditorium Theater. Those were our two main ones for me. I missed the Kinetic Playground, which had the shows like that Bill Graham did at Fillmore East and West. So I didn't get to be a part of that scene. But again, I was a little bit on the young side for it. Although, by the late 60s and early 70s, all the older kid influences took over, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, the preparation we went through for those concerts was pretty amazing.
So did you launch into you were in Chicago, right? When you first got into it. So did um was Evening Star Productions the first thing you started? Or did you kind of phase into that?
Well, right after high school, 72, I went to Berkeley with a couple friends of mine from Chicago and fully intended on moving there and staying there. I wanted out of Chicago. Other than the weather, I didn't care. I didn't think I could have any opportunity to get into this business. I could play drums, but not good enough to be in a big group. I could sing and carry a tune, but not good enough to be that front guy. I should have stayed with baseball. I should have done it. I really should have. I'm really sad about that, but I wouldn't trade what happened for anything because it all worked out. Uh, but the real kicker was when I did go to Berkeley and I got to be involved as a nobody, runner or helper on a few shows. And one thing led to another, a little security job here, a runner job there, loading in equipment there. Um, by 73, I was convinced I could do this. And my dad and a friend of mine and his dad put together $11,000 to stake me, which doesn't sound like a lot of money these days, but at the time it was a
Yeah.
fortune for me anyway.
Well, in
And
that time, yeah.
and I booked my first show. It was either at the end of 73 or early 74. It was Herbie Hancock and Weather Report at the Celebrity Theater, which is a dynamite show. Both Herbie and Weather Report were getting the shit played out of them on KDKB, which was a great radio station in the 70s in Phoenix. And I remember it was April 8th, 74. And I'm about to go on sale. It was going to do great. It was at the Celebrity Theater, which I booked to this day. And Saul Safian was the agent from ATI New York. Calls me up one day in kind of not a good mood. And he goes, "Look, we got to postpone the show." I go, "What for?" I mean, it was all set. It was $5,500 for both groups. 3,500 for Herbie, 2 grand for Weather Report.
Uh-huh.
And Headhunters was just released, and I think if I'm not mistaken, it was Sweet Nighter that was Weather Report. And I love both bands. And Herbie was already a legend to me, and I was 19 at the time. And the reason he was postponing was because his agency also booked Deep Purple, and they had Deep Purple already booked that night to a place across town called Big Surf, which is an outdoor fake wave surf park.
Okay.
And groups used to play there before I moved there, and for a little while afterwards, they were there for a few years. Pink Floyd played there, Rod Stewart played there. I remember Tesla played there later, but Deep Purple's a play there. So what's the big deal? I mean, nobody I know is going to go to both shows, and it's
So
not competition. And really wrong about that because I would have gone to either one of those shows if I had money to go to concerts. At the time, I really didn't. But he says, "Who plays Deep Purple?" I said, "KDKB." "Who plays Herbie Hancock?" "KDKB." He goes, "Case closed." So we moved the show to June. The Celebrity Theater wasn't open. Neither was Weather Report. So I had half the show. And what I didn't know, April was school time and everybody's still around. And in June, people either had summer jobs or they went on vacation with their families
Yeah.
or whatever, but it was distraction time. Plus, I wasn't in the right hall. Ended up going to Symphony Hall, which is a beautiful place. And that's where I did my first show in Phoenix with Herbie Hancock. But instead of Weather Report, I had Charles Lloyd, who's a great sax player, great jazz guy, but he doesn't mean any tickets. And at that first show, which I remember as clear as can be, Herbie said when he first met me, he didn't know that Charles Lloyd was on the show. He goes, "Oh yeah, I like Charles Lloyd. He's great." He goes, "But he doesn't sell any tickets." He goes, "You should have just said to me, why don't you do 45 minutes of acoustic piano?" And advertise that. He goes, people would have gone crazy to see me do that by myself and then play with the headhunters
Interesting.
afterwards. And Jesus, I'm finding out about this now. And he would have done it for the same price, 3,500, but I didn't know that. And interesting thing, I tried to get Keith Jarrett to open, and he didn't have an agent. I called him myself. I don't know how I got his number, and he wanted to kill me because I wanted to mix him with Herbie, who he felt had sold out by going into funk. And what
Uh,
and I think Herbie proved him wrong with history because he's still as big as he ever was
so
to
yeah.
this day, playing the music that made him famous with Miles to begin with. But anyway, that was a great eye opener, and I had so much fun. We didn't make any money, didn't really lose any money, but it was my entree into doing shows in Phoenix. And although that wasn't the very first show, a few weeks earlier, I had the Mahavishnu Orchestra in Tucson and only did about 1,000 or 1,100 people, about half a house. Lost money on that show. And I knew it when I booked them, but I should have paid more attention to it. Was people weren't ready for the new Mahavishnu. They were the old one with the Jan Hammer and McLaughlin and Billy Cobham. Um, that was the group, and unfortunately, that wasn't what I got. Had I gotten them, it would have sold out, and it was really a completely different group. The greatest thing about that show, and still haunts me, but it's so funny to this day. I thought I could go and book an opening act without, you know, saying anything. So
just
I
go out
booked
and book it.
so I booked this new group called Journey to open for Mahavishnu. And the manager, his name is Elliot Sears. I think he's still around. Calls me up. He goes, "Hey, Danny, Elliot Sears. I manage Mahavishnu. Is this your first show?" I go, "Yeah." "Why? How do you know?" He goes, "Did you really book Journey without asking anybody or mentioning to anybody, like, I'm going to have an opening act?" He goes, "It's too early to play Bill Graham. You can't do that with this group." I go, "Why not?" 23 people on stage. It's a real orchestra, which I knew. I knew it was going to be what was on that album. And I knew it wasn't the original Mahavishnu, but I booked it anyway. And thinking that it would translate, and it really didn't. But then I had to call Journey back and fire them over $500, which was when I was paying them. And that was their first show outside of California.
Was it really? Oh my,
And I got the wrath of Herbie Herbert.
is this what, 74, 70, 74?
74, early
Yeah.
74. So it was an evening with Mahavishnu, and also, again, it was right at the beginning of June, June 2nd, in fact. And again, it was hotter than hell. And I realized that with my first year of living in Arizona full time, I learned quickly about school and about the heat and about the summer.
Hmm.
And although I do book shows in the summer, I don't book so many anymore because most of the amphitheaters get everything, and all the groups that tour in the summer. I'm not in that category
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, but that's how I started doing shows, and it really in both those cases, definite trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't have the money for trial and error.
Yeah.
I don't have it now for trial and error, but I can afford it better now than I did then, because just the slightest mistake, the wrong move, it'll cost you tickets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being
Well,
in
and you've got a few
being
years
in
under your belt
June
now.
cost me tickets.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got a few years under your belt. You've been doing this for a minute. And so you've been doing this for a minute. You got any good stories for us? I know there's a Frank Zappa story in there somewhere.
There's, I could probably look at a list of shows and tell you something about any of mine. Who do you want to hear about?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you had a Frank Zappa,
Well, the Frank Zappa,
Halloween story.
the Frank story is a funny one. Um, I was doing shows in a lot of different places with Frank, with Fred Ornauer from Jam Productions in Chicago, and we became affiliated, and Jam and I worked together for over 20 years. They were like a silent partner who, at the very beginning, helped fund me with some deposits and things like that, and some connections. And I was already on my way when I met up with them. I was already booking shows and doing stuff, but their help and their credibility definitely helped me out. Anyway, I'm doing some shows with Zappa with Fred, and we had one at the Old Lady of Brady in Tulsa, and it was on Halloween night. And as I remember, I believe we had two sellouts that night, and we had masks made up, and I had somebody draw a Frank Zappa face. And the hardest thing was getting the rubber band around the back so you could hold it on. And our idea was Frank would come out on stage for the first show, and we turned the lights up before the show started, right when he was going to start. And you really don't want to mess with Frank, especially. I mean, this was right after, well, not right after, it was probably late 70s, early 80s. So this was after Flo and Eddie, after Overnight Sensation. Frank was a big star. We're selling out two shows at 8,000 tickets. He is a big star. And he goes out, and the lights are about to blow up with the stage and everything. And we had the house lights go on. Everybody's sitting there with their Frank mask on. And he's just about to start. And he just lost it. And he looks at the side of the stage like, you fuckers. And we're rolling, laughing, crying, his crew, us, and everything. And he goes to the microphone in pure Frank's style and goes, well, needless to say, I'm very surprised, but you are the best looking audience I've ever seen. And he never forgot that. I thought that was great.
That's
The
funny.
greatest thing about Frank, way earlier on, 1973, before I did any shows, they played, and I was a huge Zappa fan from the time Lumpy Gravy came out and Absolutely Free and We're Only in It for the Money. I loved those records as a kid in grade school. Me and a friend of mine listened to them nonstop. We just, and all the good music we listened to is 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. I
Yeah.
mean, really great music. My parents hated it, my mom especially. Oh my God, he's so ugly.
Yeah.
She hated Frank because just of the way he looked, the hair and everything. And I knew every word to every song on those records. And he was playing at the Celebrity Theater, which I frequented prior to doing shows there. And I got backstage and I met Ruth Underwood and I met Ian Underwood, and who were my idols. I just loved them from those Zappa albums. They were big stars to me. I was very impressed with them. They introduced me to Frank, and one thing led to another. And I talked my way into an audition with Frank Zappa to sing with them. And he goes, well, we're going to be recording in Ike Turner's Secret Sound Studios in Studio City. Why don't you come down? I'll give you a whirl. Let's see if you got it.
Okay.
So I actually made my way there. I had no money, but I managed to get there. He right on time. I go there, and he comes out of the studio, comes out to get me in the lobby. He's wearing his SG, and he goes, "Come on, we'll do it right now." As we're walking in, he puts his arm on. He goes, "You can read music, right?"
No, not so much.
He stops. He goes, "Before we go in, I'm not going to let you do this. I'm not going to let you audition until you learn how to read music. I've had this problem with my band for years. They get mad at me when I go back and redo their parts because they don't know how to play it until I show them. So I figure, save the time. I'll show them later. I'll record it my way." And he goes, "I don't want to do that anymore." Yeah, tell that to Joe Satriani and Adrian Belew, which, didn't know how to read music either. Oh, we got right in. Steve Vai,
Ye-
and I wasn't playing guitar though. I was just going to sing. He goes, "I'm not going to do this." So that was one of the things also that pushed me out the door of, I knew baseball was gone. Now I
Mhm,
knew music was gone because I
mhm,
would have to read music. Something in my head would not allow me to go out and learn how to read it. And I should have. I mean, you should know how to read music anyway.
mhm.
But I didn't pay attention in class well enough because they tried to teach me. And but that was another reason why I moved on.
Well, so Danny, in plain English, what does a concert promoter actually do from first phone call to final settlement? Give us kind of the bridge. Here's how from a band's perspective. What do you do from start to finish for them?
Well, the thing that a promoter supplies and what I try to do is, I mean, you got to be the expert. It helps if you love the music to
Yeah,
begin with, but you got to be aware of what the group means in the marketplace. You got to have the right places to do the shows. Um, you have to be welcomed by those people. You have to know, at the time, not so much anymore, but you had to know the people at the radio stations. I mean, it was crucial. To me, it still is crucial,
mhm,
but it's very sad that radio's turned the way it is. I
mhm,
mean, they're like 7-Elevens as opposed to personally owned delicatessens. Um,
yeah,
Everybody does it the same way. They play the same crap over and over and over again.
mhm,
No disrespect to the groups that they play, because many of them have had some part in their careers, or we've done shows together
sure,
or whatever. But nothing against that. Good for them. But how many more times does Led Zeppelin need to be played?
yeah,
Do I need to hear More Than a Feeling by Boston one more time?
mhm,
And it's like all the airplay these guys give all those stars. Great songs, great music, but we're tired of it, fellas.
mhm,
Play us, just continue to feed us new music, along with music that's a little obscure that maybe we miss, and mix that stuff in.
mhm,
I'm a happy camper.
mhm,
When people come to town, play their music, and they don't. I mean, I had to beg people to play Jeff Beck when he sold out.
yeah,
It's like, doesn't it matter to you what? It's research to acknowledge success. And if
yeah,
somebody sells out a concert on any given night of the week in any given month, there's something very special about them to get people to drop whatever they're doing in their lives
mhm,
and go to a show. So, that was that's one of the things that you have to do as a promoter, is you've got to have all those things together. Then you got to have some money or connections so that you can rent the hall, and so you can start promoting the show, which costs money. You have to set up everything from the beginning. You have to order what stagehands they're going to need the day of the show. The hall typically provides all the in-house features like security and ticket selling and ticket taking and ushers. You got to learn about all that and know it. So when you sell the tickets, you promote the show, the group comes in, now you got to put on the show.
mhm,
And pretty much all of it's done in advance with your phone calls and your advance work and everything. You got to feed the band backstage. You got to feed the crew in most cases, because it's easier to feed them there than have them break for an hour and leave the facility. You want to keep them close. You got to open the doors up, and you got to put on a show. And
mhm,
you got to pay the band. You got to pay all those people that I just talked about sooner or later. Usually sooner, if
mhm,
they don't know you beforehand.
yeah,
Once they know you, you can pretty much do normal business type of stuff. Um, but until they know you, you've got to work your way through it again, more trial and error,
Mhm.
and try to do things as professionally as possible, as economically as possible, and always with a little bit of flair they're going to remember you for. Hopefully, the show works out, and the next time they tour, you get them back again.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when you don't get them back, it usually means you did something bad.
Yeah.
You screwed up somewhere. But the promoter is the local representative for any band touring or local band, and the idea is you push them out in front of every other show and try to make it important enough for people to to buy a ticket and attend.
Mhm. Mhm. So, do you handle so who approaches you the most? Maybe the artist directly, in your case, or the managers, or I mean,
Most
who's
most national artists, which is who I work with. I mean, I work with local bands not as much as I used to, because for the most part, bands either do evening with anymore or they bring somebody with them. Um, but I hate it when somebody says they're going to do 75 minutes and they want to do an evening with. I go, that's not an evening with, that's an hour and 15 minutes with.
yeah.
And I don't like charging people $5, much less $100 for a 75-minute show. I think they deserve to see somebody else. Maybe they like somebody else and they learn about a new group. That's
Mhm.
what happened with me when I went to my early shows. Is I loved it when a great opening act would appear, especially if I already liked them. Like Emerson, Lake and Palmer was sold out, and then they added Yes after it was sold out. And it was the first time Yes played in Chicago. It was mind blowing to get those two on the same bill. I mean, and this is when they were young and hungry and so into making it.
Mhm.
Both groups. Um, anyway, where were we?
Yeah, so when you get approached
So
first.
usually it's a booking agent who will call you, and the booking agent is the one who calls on or seeks promoters from, like, say a group says, I want to tour in April next year and I want to do the West Coast. So they'll go through all the states and they'll go and get their offers from people typically that they know, promoters they've already done business with. Or in some cases, you'll have a young guy come up who isn't well known and he'll raise his hand and he'll reach out and he'll say, I want to book so and so. And they'll say, well, we already got a promoter for that, or make an offer. And you go through the ritual of making the offer. Um, the bands have managers, which the booking agent's going to clear the date with. The manager speaks on behalf of the group, but the agent basically speaks on behalf of the group, but through the manager.
Okay.
So it's a mixture of stuff. Sometimes I'll want to book a group, so I'll find out who books them, and I'll call them up or write them a note and talk to them about it. But in most cases, a booking agent will call you up because he knows you're in the area from doing other shows, and they know they can trust you and you're going to pay the group and not screw it up.
Mhm.
And you're past all that. So they're calling you whenever they know they've got the show that you may or may not want to book. Um, then it comes down to, does the group mean something in the market? And this is where the crystal ball comes in.
There you go.
You need the crystal ball.
Yeah.
Or you need to know enough about your market and that band and the fans in your marketplace to determine, is this worth the risk? How many people do I got to sell tickets to? Not just to break even, but to make money, because that's our goal, is to make money. The band wants to make money. I want to make money, but first and number one on top of the list for doing concerts, it's about the music and having an audience with fans that love them, and you're going to reach those people and you're going to get them to come to the show.
Yeah.
And that's why you get to be a successful or in demand concert promoter. Once you start doing that, as I did, you make a name for yourself, and you become the guy in that area
Mhm.
that people are calling on. And it's very similar, you know, to what a band with a following. Promoters become known for putting on quality events,
Mhm.
bringing great bands, and the word gets around of who you've worked with and what you're up to, and they go out, they see it from afar, and they go, I want to work with that guy. Now remember, back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, this is all before computers.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, when I look back, I'm thinking, what do we have, logs out there, and
Yeah.
we're playing to each other? What we had telephones. We
Yep.
actually had to talk to people. Oh
Pick
my
up the
God.
phone and talk to somebody. Yep.
You actually have to communicate with somebody directly. We didn't have this set up with the Zooms and all that, but and you would, when you were booking an act, you'd have to call that agent up, typically in New York or Los Angeles, and you'd have to go through every expense with them and tell them, because that's what they wanted. They wanted to know how much was the show going to cost to put on. Then you add the artist fee, total it up. You've got X amount of tickets. You got to figure out what the right ticket price is, taking into consideration at that time how much people are typically getting for shows. And oftentimes the manager or the agent will say to you, well, how much is so and so charging? That's what I want to charge.
Hmm.
Or guys like Bob Seger or the Grateful Dead would always go, how much are the other guys charging? We're going to charge less.
Hmm.
Garth Brooks was like that. There wasn't a lot of groups that did it that way, but it's funny that all those groups remain popular forever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they looked out for their fans. Many people back then, just like now, was like, how much can I make? I want to make as much as I possibly can. The problem with that is it gets passed on to the customer.
Hmm.
And the customer, just like a tariff, the customer has to pay that tariff. That group wants 50 grand instead, but they belong in a 20 to 30,000 range, so that you can charge you. There's at certain point in your career, second time in, maybe even the third time in, third or fourth time in, if you're going to be anything, you better be selling out the halls you're in or going into bigger halls.
Yeah.
But even if you stay in the same size hall for a while, doesn't mean you're a loser. It just means you have, maybe you're an eclectic artist and you're not going to appeal to as many people as the Eagles,
Right.
and
Right.
maybe you're Gentle Giant. You're only going to draw 1,000 people,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is 1,000 amazing people that love an amazing group. That's how the circle kind of works.
Yeah.
You've got to be there to the point where I find that over the years there were people who knew me before I knew them because of having worked the market for so long, and I'm the guy that they wanted to work with, which is terribly flattering. But they're right. I'm the best equipped to work with that artist in the market at that time.
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion going on in general. Some of the artists we have on, we talk about whether they should charge, how much they should charge, if the newer guys should be out there doing whatever giveaway stuff they can do, if they should, there's almost a polarity in that discussion on doing anything for free or very cheap versus leveling the marketing price point, if you will, you know.
You know, one of the most important things that I ask when I'm booking groups nowadays, because everybody's all over the road with how much they want.
Yeah.
And in most cases, like somebody says, so and so is going to tour. For a second, I get excited. Yeah, I want to do that, and I'm going, oh, what are they going to ask for?
Hmm.
The other day, there was a good package run by me, and I'm going 75 to 100 grand. They quoted me 250.
Hmm.
But I'm not going to say who it was because I don't want to embarrass them, and I
Yeah.
may want to do the show if
Yeah.
they come down in their price. But everybody, and especially in the older demo, they're not in this for their jollies anymore. They're not
Right.
in here to go out and meet girls or get high or get out of the house and go tour. They're there to make money.
Yeah.
And the thing is though is you want to make money continuously. You never want to quit making money. You never want to quit touring when you're a popular touring group. One of the best surefire ways to do it is to give bad shows and charge too much. If you give great shows, you can keep your ticket price up there. But you want to leave people something so they can buy some drinks at the show, have dinner before the show, pay for the babysitter, and not bankrupt them after
Yeah.
all these expenses that go in for the normal person to buy a show ticket. And I don't think a lot of people really take that into consideration anymore because it's really, and it typically always is, a seller's market from the booking agent side, because there's competitors that I'll have. I'm not the biggest promoter in town anymore,
Mhm.
and there's always somebody else willing to pay more. They can absorb if it loses. To them, it's about market position and owning everything for their, in the case of Live Nation and their stock plays. They want to look good to everybody out there because people buy stock. It's a different business than what I'm in.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that stock play, and I'm not saying I wouldn't mind being in a position myself,
Mhm.
but the fact is nobody else is quite like them, and they've done a hell of a job as far as all that goes. But in doing so, they squashed a lot of people,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a monopoly in the sense that they're really people aren't really able to make choices when they go into various markets. When you got one promoter that's so big, they have every room from small to big.